Hi, and welcome to the fourth in my series on using Photoshop to edit landscape images. Now, as with the previous videos in this series, I'm working with this image here, which has some fairly dark shadow areas and some fairly light highlight areas, and what I'm going to do is to use Photoshop to even these up. Now, in the previous videos, I have used adjustment layers and created masks to selectively apply increases in exposure in the shadows area and decreases of exposure in the highlights area. Now in this video I'm going to use an adjustment layer again, but I'm not going to use the mask it created. So it's a radically different approach, and it comes from you really via Blake Rudis at F64, and he has produced a detailed video on this approach which I will link down below. But what I'm going to do here is very much give you an overview of how you can use it. So to start off, I'm going to again select the adjustments menu, but this time I'm going to go to selective color. And what you can see with the selective color menu here is that we can adjust the cyan, magenta, yellow and black component of each of a range of different colors. So basically what we're doing is within this image, the layer is actually creating its own mask for the different colors. Now if we just left that at the normal blend mode for layers, it would adjust the color. But if I set this to luminosity blend, any changes I make to color will simply result in the brightness or luminosity of that color being increased without the color being changed. So if we start off with the black, and then I look at the black slider, what you'll see is as I drop this down, it will start to bring up the blacks area. Now I can't afford to do that very much with black, so it starts to become quite muddy. I can look at the other colors which might actually appear in that area, and you can see the yellow is having a slight effect. The magenta is having an effect, and the cyan is having an effect. If I feel I've gone too far, I can just click on these to double click on these to reset them. Now in his video, Blake Rudis talks about the color theory underpinning these changes, but here I'm just going to briefly illustrate the effects you can get. So I've lifted these shadows a little bit. If I now go to neutrals, again starting with the black, which modifies the intensity, you see now I'm bringing up the shadows more without it going so muddy. So there's a degree of experimentation here. Again, I can just try the individual colors to see whether they're making a difference. But remember that in doing this, what I'm doing is affecting the luminosity because I've set the blend mode to luminosity. So it's not affecting the color intensity, just the brightness of the colors. Again, let's just try the magenta and the cyans. Okay, so the shadows are not looking too bad. I could scroll through the rest of the colors here to see if they're having an effect, but I'm going to now look at the sky. So if we look at the blues and again go to the black, and you can see I can bring up the intensity or bring down the intensity of the blues in the sky, and again I can tweak the individual color channels to see what color components are in there that might affect the luminosity. But the other thing that's in the sky is the white, so I can have a look at the white, and you can see I can dull down the whites by sliding up the black and the white slider. Again, there will be other color components in that area, so it's worth just briefly checking whether any of these influence, and the magenta does, so I can tune that down a bit. Now, and that again I can just tweak with the cyan component. So if I turn that layer on and off, you can see that I've balanced that exposure quite nicely, just simply by using this. Now the other thing that you can do is if I create another version of that adjustment layer, but this time leave it at normal, I can now, having boosted the brightness of these layers, I can now actually play with the intensities of the colours. So if I go to blue, I can now just subtly affect the intensity of the blue. And again, I can play with these individual colour channels. So having actually changed the brightness of the layers, I can then change the saturation to some extent. So if we go to the greens, we've got some green in there. Again, you can pick up this. You need to be a little careful. These sliders are quite small. You see the green in the middle is being varied. So that effectively is it. Very simple approach. 2 layers. Don't need to use the master tool. Just dialing in first of all with the blend mode set to luminosity, and then creating a second layer with the blend mode set to normal. I can adjust the color and the intensity of the different colors within that image. So turn it all off. That's what I started with, and that's what I end up with. Now, compared with the other techniques, this is fairly subtle and probably would work better in conjunction with one of the other techniques to make fine adjustments. But I think it's an incredibly powerful technique. It's one that I've not used a lot, but I anticipate using a lot more in future. I thought it was well worth adding to this series, and I very much recommend you look at Blake Rudis's video on this, because it will give you a lot more background and a lot more illustration of the subtleties of the techniques, of the effects you can achieve. So I hope you found this useful, and once again, thank you very much for watching.